is an Eyewitness News special presentation, The 93 Vote, the New Jersey gubernatorial debate. Sponsored by the New Jersey League of Women Voters. And now, here's Eyewitness News anchor Greg Hurst.
Good evening. With only 3.5 weeks until Election Day, the candidates for New Jersey governor are ready for their first television debate. Democratic Governor Jim Florio is ahead in recent polls and seems to have turned around voters' sentiment since his $2.8 billion tax hike. Christine Todd Whitman presented her own economic plan last month, including a proposal to cut state income taxes by 30%. We're going live now to Trenton for the New Jersey gubernatorial debate, co-hosted by Eyewitness News anchor Bill Beutel and sponsored by the New Jersey League of Women Voters. Here's the debate.
Good evening. Welcome to this gubernatorial debate. I'm Catherine Becker, president of the League of Women Voters of New Jersey. The League is nonpartisan and encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government. We believe in grassroots democracy. You do have a stake in the outcome of this election. This debate will give you an opportunity to judge the major candidates side by side in a discussion of important public policy issues. Tonight's debate is being sponsored by the League of Women Voters of New Jersey Education Fund. Our hosts for this evening are WPVI-TV Philadelphia and WABC-TV New York. Now we invite you to watch the debate.
Good evening. I'm Bill Beutel of WABC-TV.
And I'm Jim Gardner of WPVI-TV, and we welcome you to the debate between the candidates for governor of New Jersey.
I think it's probably safe to assume that by now you've heard about the candidates, read something about them, or seen their advertisements. Tonight they are together here in the WPVI Trenton studios, and we're looking forward to an informative exchange. Here are the candidates: Governor Jim Florio, the Democratic incumbent, and Christine Todd Whitman, the Republican nominee.
Our format tonight features questions from reporters with answers and discussion from the candidate. To ensure fairness, there are time limits on each response. Each candidate will have a closing statement at the end of this debate. The panelists asking the questions tonight, along with Bill Beutel and me, are Darlene Superville, State House reporter for the Associated Press, David Novarro, New Jersey correspondent for WABC-TV in New York, and Nora Muchanic, the New Jersey correspondent for WPVI-TV in Philadelphia.
And so it's time to begin. The order of the candidates was determined by a flip of a coin before the program began. Darlene Superville has the first question, and it goes to Christine Todd Whitman. Darlene?
Mrs. Whitman, 3 years ago, anybody who considered challenging Governor Florio for re-election was considered a sure bet to win, and that includes yourself. After campaigning for 3 years, you've endured a summer of your own missteps, plus attacks from the governor. You've gone through 3 campaign managers, and the polls now put you anywhere from 13 to 21 points behind the governor, with about a month before the election. What's happening? What's going on in your campaign?
Well, first, Darlene, before I answer that, I just want to take a moment, and I believe that the governor will join me to extend our support to the troops that we have in Somalia, but particularly here in New Jersey, to the families of Corporal James Smith and Specialist 4th Class Dominic Pila, to let them know that our hearts and our prayers are with them tonight. As far as the question of what's happened with the campaign, the governor paid me a compliment the other day, although I'm sure he didn't mean it, which was when he said that I was an amateur. He's right. I haven't spent the last 30 years running for office. Any mistakes that my campaign has made over the course of the summer from wanting to discuss issues in their fullest, not in 30 or 60-second sound bites. And that means that I have a standard that I work to, and it's a standard of which I'm proud and I have held to. That's the ability to come home at night and tell my children they can be proud of everything that I have done and said over the day, and that any policy that I have offered, any position that I have stated, is one in which I believe deeply and is good policy for the people of New Jersey.
Response from Mr. Florio.
Well, first of all, let me join Mrs. Whitman. When I spoke to the families of the 2 young men who unfortunately were killed in Somalia yesterday, I did extend to them the condolences of all of our people. But I think what's happening in the campaign is that people are starting to understand the stark differences between myself and Mrs. Whitman. I mean, I'm proud of our assault weapon ban. She called it lousy legislation. I think that the reforms that we're making in the welfare area to make parents pay for their children rather than taxpayers is the way to go. She described that as radical. She has been critical of some of the sentencing legislation that I've signed. saying that carjackers should go away for 5 years. She felt it was tough. She's come up with a plan that I assume we'll talk about later on that really isn't very credible to deal with the economy, while we've been working very hard to put people back to work and doing it with some success.
Follow through.
Mrs. Whitman, with the time that's left, several weeks left before the November election, what do you do now to convince voters that you are prepared to govern, that you should be elected governor?
Well, Darlene, the governor has delighted in doing tonight. He started to do it again, what he's been doing throughout this campaign, which is taking positions and twisting them and trying to scare people. And I find it incredible that when you have a chief executive who has 3.5 years of a record on which to, that so far none of his ads on major network television have been positive ads about what he's done for the state or proposes to do for the next 4 years. Instead, they're negative ads on me. And that just indicates to me someone who doesn't feel that his record is one that the voters buy, because it's cost us 300,000 jobs, almost 300,000 jobs. We lead the nation in home foreclosures. Our people, the people of this state, are hurting every day, and that's what this is all about.
Thank you very much. David Navarro has a question for Mr. Florio.
Thank you, Bill. Governor Florio, when you first ran for governor, you told the voters that you saw no need to raise taxes. And of course, as we know, once you took office, you say you inherited a budget that could only be cured with a $2.8 billion hike. 3.5 years later, we find ourselves with the Republican legislature coming out with a plan where you say that there could be room for some tax relief. Tell us today, if you will, do you believe that there can be a no new tax pledge? And does that mean, if you do not take that position, does that mean you're considering raising tax? If not, why don't you take the pledge?
If there's anybody in the state who knows the price one pays when you lift taxes, I suspect it's me. I know about bumper stickers. I know about toilet paper thrown on your front lawn. So what it is that I want to do is to be able to be responsible. Is it responsible to say no new taxes, read my lips? The answer is no. I believe that, and up until a week ago, Mrs. Whitman believed that. She apparently has turned around because she's been criticizing me in the last week in her ads for saying that I would not rule out taxes. I happen to think that's the responsible thing to do. We have gone through 3 years with no new taxes, 3 years with balanced budgets, with good surpluses, and we've done that in the worst of times. Now, as the economy is starting to come back, I am hopeful and confident that by virtue of the rainy day fund that we have, the $400 million surplus that we started this year with, that we will be all right. But am I going to take a pledge to say never any new taxes? It would not be responsible, and I would not do it.
Ms.
Well, I wouldn't have expected the governor to take a pledge saying no new taxes, because last time on his ballot statement when he said he wouldn't raise taxes, he then within 6 months raised them $2.8 billion. And quite frankly, and Governor, I'm prepared to give it out tonight, if we continue with business as usual, the kind of spending that we've seen, the increase in growth in spending, the loss of jobs and businesses in this state, if we continue, as you have said, that you would do just exactly what you've been doing to the state, we will have a deficit at the end of fiscal year 95 of $700 million and no surplus. The governor takes credit for balancing a budget. That's in the Constitution. The only time that we have seen tax cuts in this state was when the Republicans overrode his veto to roll back the 1 penny on the sales tax. The only time we've seen a cut in spending and had a budget that was smaller than the year before was when the Republicans overrode his veto to cut $1.1 billion out of the budget. I think that record speaks for itself.
David?
If I could follow up, Governor, if you say you won't make the pledge, then can you tell us where might you make increases if it became a situation where you were required to come up with more money?
Well, we have in the last 4 years, by the end of this year, we'll have 1,000 fewer state employees on the payroll. We have reduced the size of the state payroll. We have been combining whole departments. We have been, as I said, created a rainy day fund. What we are doing is to try to make government more cost effective. At the same time, we are also getting the economy moving. Home building is up in New Jersey, like it is up nowhere else in the entire region. We're starting to see the economy come back. Last night I received an award from the Alliance for Action, which is a business and labor organization, because of the infrastructure investments that we've made. That's the way you grow an economy, so that you can have appropriate growth and not have to deal with taxes.
Thank you. Nora Muchanic has a question for Ms. Whitman.
Mrs. Whitman, your economic plan calls for a 30% income tax cut over 3 years, and you say that you'll pay with that with over $1 billion in potential cuts, such as management reforms, privatizing some services, and limiting the growth of the state budget. Now, some critics have called your plan a fraud, in part because you've refused to be more specific about where those cuts will be. The feeling is that voters have a right to know what services or benefits they're going to lose in order to get that tax cut. Mrs. Whitman, will the cuts be in human services, welfare? Will money for state colleges be on the block? Please tell us specifically what you plan to cut.
Well, Nora, as I said from the beginning, first of all, let me say that not everybody disagrees with the plan. If you read the New York Times this morning, experts from across the country are taking it seriously. The Wall Street Journal has editorialized in favor of the ability to do this. If you were able to double people's taxes in 1 year, as the governor did in 6 months, why is it so incredulous to people that you can lower taxes 30% over 3 years? What we are talking about doing is 5 cents on the dollar. I have the ability, as the governor does, to have a line item veto, impoundment authority, and I have a willing legislature behind me, the leadership on both sides who have done it before and are willing to do it again. Just by limiting the rate growth of state government to 3% instead of the almost double the cost of living increase that we've seen recently, you will save $500 million. If you just keep the employees of this state so that if 2 of them working in the state government, both covered by family plans, instead of each having their own plan, they each have 1 plan, you save between 50 and 70 million. The cuts are there to be made.
Well, can you please be specific about where those cuts would come from? We haven't heard any details yet about exactly, perhaps even just programs or areas where you would consider doing that.
Well, Nora, there are 2 things. One is that I can look when I see things numbers that tell me that tens of thousands of dollars are spent by the Department of Corrections to buy Adidas sneakers for prisoners. Those are the kinds of things we can cut. Department of Human Services spent over $200,000 last year for an executive search firm. Those are the little things. The big things are cutting the rate of growth of state government, holding it in, and then we're going to get in and do a performance audit, use what's been done before. This governor's done some of it, and I congratulate him on that. But there are over $500 million in potential cuts and savings that haven't been implemented yet. There is plenty of ways to do it. Republicans did it, and I expect the governor to say the world will come to an end. He did that last time, and it didn't.
Well, Mr. Florio, if that's what you're going to say, you have a chance.
$1.5 billion worth of Adidas sneakers is a lot of sneakers.
10,000.
That's what you have to do in order to cut the budget in the way that Mrs. Whitman is talking about. This is the plan. You know, it's 2 sheets. Numbers don't add up one side to the other side. And it really is promising people pie in the sky without telling anybody where the dough is going to come from. I mean, what we're talking about is promising people 30% reductions. My understanding is now people in the cities are being promised a 50% reduction. The total amount of money that costs is $1.5 billion. No one is saying where the money is going to come from, other than now we're going to talk about cutting Adidas sneakers. This really doesn't make a lot of sense. By the way, the comments in the New York Times today were kind of interesting, because the people who were heralding the plan were the people who wrote the plan. And I would hope that they would be the people that would be supportive. But if you look at the editorials all across this state, no one regards it as a credible plan.
All right. Jim Gardner has a question now for Mr. Florio.
Governor, regardless of what you think of her plan, Mrs. Whitman seems to have set much of the economic agenda of this campaign with her pledge to cut taxes by 30%. That's what people are talking about. Your economic plans for the future seem to be based on a $1 billion loan program through the Economic Development Agency for businesses and development agencies and for schools, some for businesses, some for development agencies, some for schools. Some pundits have called this limited at best. Is this the plan of a visionary, or is this the plan of a bureaucrat with a calculator?
Well, my plan, as I said, is not sort of a magic wand on 2 sheets of paper. What my plan is sitting on the runway up at Newark Airport, Kiwi Airlines. Go talk to Bob Iverson, who's the CEO, who will tell you that but for the state loan guarantees, that program, that whole airline would not have gotten off the ground. My plan is the Rutgers University Stadium that we are building, that Mrs. Whitman opposed. My plan is the convention center in Atlantic City that is being built right now, that Mrs. Whitman opposed. My plan is the Performing Arts Center. My plan is keeping the high level of credit rating that we have right now, which gives us the ability to go and invest in the sewage treatment plants, to invest in transportation systems, to invest in the Jersey Shore. You know, we had a wonderful year at the Jersey Shore. Our $18 billion tourism industry flourished. It's because we're taking serious concerns about investing in our small businesses as well as in our job training programs.
You mentioned that those who have treated the Whitman plan, if you will, with some seriousness in the New York Times today were those who also helped write the plan, and I assume you mean Professor Harry Rosen, chairman of the Department of Economics at Princeton University, who said that if there is a political will, it can be done. But what about budget officials who are also quoted in that same story from New York and Michigan and Delaware who say it was done in their states and it was effective and productive?
The consultant from Michigan is someone who's the political representative to the Treasury Department there, who Mrs. Whitman has been very candid about saying she has been consulting on the formulation of this plan. This whole plan really doesn't make any sense.
Forgive me, I'm not sure that Governor Mario Cuomo, however, in New York is helping.
This plan is not in New York.
No, but we're talking about cutting taxes, that's all.
Well, the idea of cutting taxes is fine, but that's not what's happening here. Cutting taxes with no corresponding reductions. You've got $1.5 billion in a hole. I say, tonight we heard the first degree of specificity forever. Adidas sneakers are going to be taken away from inmates, apparently. Well, you know, you got a long way to go to make up $1.5 billion. Weather-vane politicians really just won't cut it anymore. You can't tell people just what they want to hear by promising them anything.
Ms. Whitman.
Well, I would expect the governor to be in deep denial over tax cuts because he's never met a tax hike like. The point is that every time we have seen, and you look at the economic history of the state of New Jersey, and you look at the trend line, when you cut taxes, you see jobs created. He talks about the EDA and says they're creating 20,000 jobs. That's wonderful. We lost 10,000 jobs in August alone. We've lost 280,000 jobs in the last 3.5 years. We lead the nation in home foreclosure. It's the kind of thing that led to the opportunity I had to talk with someone just the other week. Was sitting on his porch outside in the rain because he couldn't go inside. It was too hot, and he couldn't afford an air conditioner because he'd lost his job just a week before, and they're trying to adopt a child, and he was scared to death for his future. This is what it's all about. It's about the people of the state of New Jersey.
I have a question now for Mrs. Whitman. President Clinton, Mrs. Whitman, is coming to New Jersey tomorrow to attempt to sell his health. The states will have a large role in implementing his health care plan when it becomes law. What do you feel is the proper role of government in providing health care for the people and in deciding how that health care is procured?
Well, government has a real role to play, and as you know, here in New Jersey, the Republican legislature last year started the initiative with a 3-bill package that they provided. But the thing that's been missing, and where I believe government really needs to put its focus, and it was missing here, and they're talking about it at the federal level, and I hope we see real changes in that, is an emphasis on preventive medicine. We have got to understand that we have got to put our money up front to prevent people from getting sick. And we've got to make more of an outreach to people. And when I look, and I spent half a day up at UMDNJ in a pediatric mobile care unit and the projects there, and when you see the effect of taking the health services to the people and how they access them, you understand the difference you can make. Because when you go through the neonatal care units, you see the number of children are there because the first time their mother saw a doctor was when they entered the room to have the baby.
Mr. Florio, same question.
Yes, it's kind of interesting because all the things that Mrs. Whitman has been advocating, we're doing already. Preventive care, we took the uncompensated care trust fund amount from $750 million down to $500 million. And we're providing better care because we're using that money in community care settings to get people out of emergency rooms. It's working very well around the state. There's more. We're going to show the nation how to go about doing these things. And she was right. It was done in a bipartisan way in the last session. We put in, ahead of everyone else, health care insurance reforms. We put in a shift off of acute emergency care assistance into community care. We are going to preventive care. We are going to primary care. That's the approach that we are taking, and it's good to hear that Mrs. Whitman thinks it's a good one. But it's not something I'm going to be advocating now because we've already started.
It can be presumed, Governor, that the states are going to have to pay a lot of money, or maybe more money than they pay now under the health plan that's being proposed. Can New Jersey afford it?
Well, I guess I reject your premise, Bill, because I'm not sure that that's the case. For example, Medicaid. We are paying a substantial amount now. We're going to be moving towards a managed care mandatory enrollment in Medicaid, which will provide the opportunity again for all of the Medicaid clientele to be able to have access to a primary care physician on a regular basis, rather than, as the case now, people get sick who are on Medicaid and they go off to an emergency room. So I think there's a way that we can provide for better care and lesser amounts of costs, which of course is a win-win situation. So I'm hopeful that the initiatives that we've put in to bring insurance rates down by stabilizing the level of entry into the system so that there will be no pre-existing disabilities barrier, those types of things are going to allow New Jersey to demonstrate some of the things that I think Washington is now talking about doing.
Thank you. Jim Gardner.
All right, we're going to begin round two of our debate right now, and I think all of us, myself included, should control our follow-ups a little bit so we can get as many questions in as we possibly can. Let's begin round two with Nora Muchanic, and her question goes to Governor Florio.
Governor, no one knows how the state Supreme Court will handle the school funding issue, but a Superior Court judge has ruled that New Jersey's Quality Education Act is unconstitutional because it's failed to close the spending gap between rich and poor districts. That judge ordered the state to spend $450 million more in the poor districts. Now, you increased income taxes more than $1 billion in 1990 to fund schools. With the state facing a deficit of over $1 billion, how can you come up with an additional $500 million without raising taxes?
Well, I don't think we're going to have to. I mean, it's interesting, Mrs. Whitman has been critical of raising the taxes that we have raised. And of course, the Supreme Court comes in and says you didn't raise them enough because you're short by $450 million. Not the Supreme Court, the lower court. We are going to be making the argument that the court is premature. The evaluation point is 1995. Obviously, we're not there. We have added $1.5 billion in new revenues into the school systems in New Jersey. I happen to think we are on the right track. We are making the appropriate changes so as to bring in even a higher degree of accountability. As we try to reduce classroom size, we're going to get better results. So that I would just take the point that we're going to argue before the Supreme Court that it's premature to make a conclusion now that we have not put enough money into the school system when we've put 1.5 in the last 3 years, and we're not even up to 1995, which is the evaluation point that the court...
Mrs. Whitman, your response.
The only thing that was premature after the first Supreme Court decision was the governor's actions, because he came out with the Quality Education Act in May, and the Supreme Court made their decision in June. And the fascinating thing to me is they said then the discrepancy between the needy districts and the wealthier districts was $440 million. So the governor now admits we've put in $1.5 billion in new money, and the judge just told us that the problem is worse. It's $450 million. Jim, where did the money go? The people have a right to know where the money went. How can we have over $1.5 billion in new funding and not know how it was spent? Not have boards aren't better. And in fact, he has a commissioner of education who finds herself in the unenviable position now of having to say, I can't find out where that money was spent. We don't know. That's inexcusable. We have to get politics out of education. We have to get standards and accountability in, core curriculum standards, and make some changes that are really going to make education better for the children of the state of New Jersey.
David Navarro, question for Mrs. Whitman.
Can I get a follow-up? I think we have...
Yeah.
It might be better if we move along a little bit more quickly now because we are behind.
Okay.
Very well.
Forgive me.
Mrs. Whitman, earlier this year, you reportedly told the owners of Gunnerama, a Jersey City gun shop, you would consider legislation to legalize certain weapons now banned in the state. What weapons would you legalize, and what is your position on the Brady bill?
Well, I'm happy to answer that question. I support the Brady bill. And contrary to what the governor has been saying in his ads, I oppose assault weapons, and I opposed and very public Republicans to override that. This bill is, from the beginning, is that those people who acquired things like .22s, kind of target and practice weapons that the Olympic team uses, and they would be arrested if they were to land at Newark Airport with their guns from a competition, those are the kinds of things that I believe people who got them legally should be grandfathered. It's a taking, that's all. It's a recognition of that. But I do not support assault weapons. But we've got to understand that the problem of crime goes far beyond an assault weapon. There have been over 400,000 crimes committed since the assault ban went into effect, and less than 1/10% of those involved assault weapons. That doesn't mean we want them on the street. We don't want them on the street. But if we think that alone is going to solve the problem of crime in the state of New Jersey, then we are being foolish. We have got to get beyond that. That's why I have called for 3 times and you're in for a 3rd time violent offender, that they go with no parole at that time. that we require people to serve 70% of their sentence. Right now, they serve an average of 20 to 25% of the sentence given them by the court. That we have judges that understand it's their responsibility to enforce the law, not to write the law. Those are the kinds of changes we need to make in order to affect the system.
Governor Florio?
You didn't get your question answered as to which weapons she would put back that are on the list now. She wants to grandfather all of the weapons that are out there. I don't know why anybody has a need for Tech-9s or any of those types of weapons. But we've been asking, which weapons on the list do you want to put back into circulation? She called it a lousy law. She and the NRA have been out just saying that this is not a law that should stand. It should be changed. And the answer is the people of this state really don't believe that there is any need for assault weapons. You can't hunt with them. You know, it's illegal, always was illegal to hunt with these types of weapons. And of course, this is not the answer to crime. But I will tell you, it is a very, very serious concern to the policemen of this state. The Fraternal Order of Police and the PBA statewide both endorsed me in large measure because they know who it is that's been working very hard for the police persons on the beat out there now. So we have worked very hard, but it's important that we have strong law enforcement, and that's the opposite of the message we've been getting.
Can I follow up just with this so that we have a clear picture here? What are the weapons you would ban?
The only weapon, ban? 90% of them on the list. The only weapon that I've talked about taking off at all would be a .22. But quite frankly, that's not the issue. The issue is government taking without understanding that there's people that have had them legally. But more importantly is the issue of crime itself. We have heard a great deal of verbiage and rhetoric out of this governor about how important this is to solving crime. And yet juvenile crime is up. Juvenile homicide rate is up 42%. Since 1989, it's gone up. Those are the things we need to get after. We need to stop these problems. Rape is up 6% statewide, and among juveniles, it's up over 11%. Those are the kinds of issues that we've got to get at.
Darlene Superville, a question for Governor Florio.
Governor, nationally, we've had the Kennedys and the Rockefellers. In New Jersey, we've had Tom Kean and Millicent Fenwick. They were all very wealthy politicians who cared about people of lesser means. We now have Mrs. Whitman, whom your campaign has portrayed as out of touch because of her family's wealth. If the Kennedys, Rockefellers, Fenwicks, and Cains can be good public servants and be rich, why is it so inconceivable to you that Mrs. Whitman could also be a good public servant for New Jersey?
This is not about wealth. This is not about credit cards. It's about credibility. And it's about who it is that understands the things that people are concerned about. I will tell you, when she says that she'll put 22s in, go talk to the mother of the girl who was killed in East Orange, New Jersey, with a Tech 22, with a 50-round banana clip, which is a piece of junk. No legitimate sportsman needs one. Or the Marlin 60, with a 17-round tubular clip. All 17 rounds were pumped into 5 priests and 2 nuns down in Texas. I mean, these are weapons that real people know don't belong in our state. And it's interesting because the rest of the nation is looking to us. And yet, Mrs. Whitman wants to go back. Now, I don't know why it is that she hasn't an understanding about when we are talking about these types of weapons, we don't need them. And they're very important symbols in some respects for saying if we're going to be tough on crime or not. Mrs. Whitman has criticized me for the 5-year mandatory sentence that we imposed upon carjackers, saying it was too tough. Real people in their state know that we need tough law enforcement. Not talk about it, we need to do something about it.
Mrs. Whitman.
Darlene, I don't think you got an answer to your question either. And I think the key here is understanding what concerns people. What concerns people is the ability to pay for their families, the ability to get their children into school and clothes for school. We have lost over 280 in the last 3.5 years. 1 out of every 40 families who owns a home in this state is facing some form of foreclosure proceeding. We lead the nation. We're number 2 in the nation in our tax burden, on our income tax burden, and that puts us almost double the national average. It puts us at 11 times that of Delaware. I mean, we're just killing people. We're losing jobs day after day after day. And let me tell you, when people in Camden, between January and August of this year, over 500 homes had been foreclosed. Ocean County was over 800 homes. That's the kind of hurt. That's what people care about. My program to reduce taxes and stimulate business will bring jobs back into the state of New Jersey and get this economy going again so people don't have to live not just in the fear of crime, which we all know has to be controlled, but they don't have to live in fear of losing their jobs and not being able to pay their bills and not being able to feed and clothe their children.
Governor, we're creating jobs. I mean, the 2,400 people that went back to work at General Motors as a result of the job training program that we've been working with people. The things that...
Excuse me, Governor, both of you agreed to this format, and right now you're not adhering to it, so...
Can I just follow that?
Certainly.
Governor, if the issue is about credibility and not about wealth, as you just said, why did your campaign make an issue of Mrs. Whitman's wealth? I mean, the farmland assessments on her property in Somerset and Hunterdon County, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, those are statements about one's values. I mean, when you go out and say that you're going to pay, $47 a year for 50 acres on a farm on one of your multiple estates, and you go and do that, that says something. That says something. I've been in this office now for 4 years. When Governor Kane left, he signed law that said that the salary would go from $85,000 to $130,000. I haven't taken the $45,000 per year because I didn't think it was appropriate in these tough times. I think it's important to understand Mrs. Whitman took 4 salary increases when she was a freeholder in Somerset County. I suspect she'll never be eligible for food stamps, but the fact of the matter is she took the salary increases and voted for them herself. Here I go and say you've got to have some sensitivity to what people are experiencing out in the real world now. And I just don't think the sensitivity is there.
And we have a follow-up on that because I would dearly like to point out his expense account is about $70,000.
I think you're going to have to use your opportunity of a closing statement to answer that question. But I do have a question for you.
Okay.
You are running a television spot right now that attacks the Florio tax hike, claiming that it has caused 8,000 business failures and has cost 280,000 jobs. The kicker of the spot says, quote, "Now Florio refused to rule out raising taxes again. He may be the worst governor New Jersey has ever had." I assume the spot refers to your opponent's refusal to sign a pledge not to raise taxes again. What I'm confused about is that it's my impression that you have refused to sign the same kind of pledge, and so therefore why would you use the refusal to sign a pledge like that
Jim, I'll tell you.
as an attack against your opponent? And one more question. Why would you as a candidate run a platform of cutting taxes, not sign a pledge not to raise them?
Well, let me take the first part of your question first. What that refers to is he told us definitively in his ballot statement in 1989 that he wouldn't raise taxes. I see no need. There is no need for new taxes. Within 6 months, he raised them $2.8 billion. The question becomes, he's not even saying that he won't do it now, that he won't rule out raising taxes. What can we expect? Neither one of us has taken a pledge not to rule out taxes, because I've said if I can find a tax that I can lower by 2 or 3% and raise another one by a fraction of a percent and it equals out from a revenue point of view or is beneficial, I will have broken that kind of a pledge. The point is we've had a series of broken promises from this governor, starting with the taxes. Then he said, and we've had this before, candidate Florio, Governor Florio. Candidate Florio was going to fix education in the state. Governor Florio hasn't. Candidate Florio was going to drop auto insurance rates 20%. Governor Florio hasn't been able to deliver on that. Candidate Florio said he was going to raise ethical standards in this state. Governor Florio hasn't delivered on that. It's been a series of broken promises. That's what that ad points to. What can we expect when you had $2.8 billion in tax increases after a positive statement on the ballot that said there's no need to raise taxes?
Governor Florio, your response.
I heard the word ethical standards a couple of minutes ago. The recent story about the overt conflict of interest and some understanding that when she was a freeholder and not only voted upon, but in fact introduced resolutions to go and to put the taxpayers' money into the banks that she and her family effectively control, and then to go and after she finishes a freeholder to go on to the board of directors of the bank, is as blatant a conflict of interest as I've ever heard. I have called upon Mrs. Whitman to do what she's asked me to do, which was to release all my taxes, my tax returns for the last 4 years. We'll send it, and I have done that. Mrs. Whitman demanded that we send it to her. We asked. The answer is no. You can't have them, with particular emphasis on 1990, the last year that she served in governmental service. I think anyone that talks about ethical standards has got to, at a minimum, start from the proposition that you have to have full disclosure as to what all of your income is and your source of income, particularly when you go and call upon the other side to do that. There can't be two sets of rules, one for somebody and then some for everybody else. That's what goes back to the point about the whole idea of if we all are going to live by the same standards.
Bill Beutel has a question for Governor Florio.
Yes, we have not yet talked about unemployment. Governor, if you're reelected, what would you do to create more jobs in New Jersey? Unemployment is very high here. It's a problem concerning people on all levels of society. What would you do?
Well, first of all, let me say something about your premise. Unemployment in New Jersey is lower than New York. It's lower than Pennsylvania. In the last 6 months, the job rate growth in New Jersey far exceeds the national rate. Most of the manufacturing jobs that we have lost in New Jersey were lost in the 80s, not in the 90s. Mrs. Whitman chooses to look at the half-empty glass all the time. What we have done in terms of investments are generating jobs on a fairly substantial basis. When we created the first-time homebuyer program, it allowed young couples, middle-class couples, to get into a home for 3% down. That sparked the New Jersey home building industry. And I hope that everybody tomorrow goes and looks at the statistics. The home building industry, which is very important in New Jersey, is increasing far in excess of the regional rate or the national rate. Those are the types of things. Investments yield jobs.
Ms. Whitman.
Well, the 10,000 jobs that were lost in August, 65% of them were in the service industry. I was just talking to a father the other day who was desperately trying to renegotiate his mortgage because he wanted to take advantage of the lower mortgage rates. But as has happened in this state, for the first time in 4 decades, in 1991 and 1992, property values went down. People have seen their taxes go up, their property values go down. This guy couldn't find a mortgage because his property was now worth less than when he had negotiated the first mortgage. That is real hurt, and that's what's happened. For this governor to talk, and I have to get back to the other situation a little bit, to talk about ethics when there's a federal jury investigating this administration, there's a state grand jury investigating this administration. The Securities and Exchange Commission is investigating this administration. You had a chief of staff who left with a subpoena in his pocket. I mean, the allegations that he's throwing around are desperate attempts to divert the public's attention from these overwhelming problems that are significant by anybody's standards. And I believe that we have to look at the total picture. You can't just be selective in what you look at.
Okay, thank you very much. The time remaining in this debate right now is limited. Therefore, we will not have follow-up questions or rebuttals during this final round. The candidates will, however, of course, be given equal time to answer each question from one of the panelists. And we turn now to Jim Gardner, who has a question for Ms. Whitman.
Thank you, Bill. Mrs. Whitman, your opponent has offered a plan that would require mothers on welfare to identify the men who have fathered their children as a requirement to get public assistance. According to the New York Times, there are about 66,000 children in the state of New Jersey who do not know their fathers. You have objected to this proposal and have been reported to have felt that many women on welfare are promiscuous and therefore don't know who their fathers are. Number one, do you stand by that? Number two, why should the state allow some fathers of welfare children to abdicate their financial responsibilities, leaving the taxpayers to shoulder those financial responsibilities instead?
Jim, I think we all agree that the state shouldn't, and we've got to do everything we can to encourage fathers to be there, not just financially, but emotionally. But that's the whole reason that the federal government requires that women identify the fathers of their children, or they lose their federal benefits, but they don't take away children. What the governor put out would take it away from the children. His target was the women, his victims were the children, and the perpetrators were the fathers, and they're not touched at all by this proposal. In this state, right now, we have a division within the Department of Human Services that works with the mothers to identify the fathers. 99% of the women have identified the fathers of their children. I venture to say, for that 1% that hasn't, they either can't meet all the requirements of where they work and what their home phone number is, or they are truly scared for good reason because of physical retribution. It doesn't mean that women on welfare are promiscuous. It means that there's a question here of abuse, family abuse, spousal abuse. That's the kind of thing. You can't just throw those children out onto the street if their mothers have that kind of a fear governing their lives.
Mr. Florio.
Mrs. Whitman called my plan radical when we put it out. And then she likened it to Nazi Germany, which was really bizarre. The plan is designed to be the logical next step of what it is that we've done. Last year, we were able to go after delinquent fathers for the most part and collect $440 million in delinquent child support payments. We got 12,000 people off of welfare. You can't go after a father if you don't know who the father is. And what we've said is that we have to have that information. As we reform the whole welfare system, we're saying it's a contract. It's rights and responsibilities. That we want to help people, but people have to help themselves as well. Forcing fathers to take responsibility is not, it certainly is not Nazi Germany-like. I don't even regard it as radical. I regard it as mainstream. And that's something that is a very dramatic difference between Mrs. Whitman and myself. Our welfare initiatives were designed to say it's time for everyone to take the responsibility for the consequences of their own action. We don't pay extra money for extra children anymore. A working mother can't demand from the boss that she gets a wage increase. Why should the welfare system be any different than the rest of life in America?
Mr. Florio, I have a question for you. There is a perception, sir, that your administration has been tainted by the resignation of your friend and Chief of Staff, Joseph Salema. Federal authorities are investigating whether bond underwriting firms made improper payments to get state bond business, improper payments to a company that was co-owned by Mr. Salema. Governor, if there was no problem here, why should Mr. Salema resign? And if there were a problem, shouldn't you have known about it and done something about it before resignation was necessary?
There were no problems, and the reason why Mr. Salema resigned was because people like Mrs. Whitman jumped on him and immediately called for his resignation. He perceived that this was clearly going to be something to divert attention from my ability to talk about welfare and job creation and assault weapons, and said that he didn't want any part of this. There have been no charges raised whatsoever. By the way, I welcome investigations in any part of the whole government so that we can find out if everything is going well. I want to hold everyone to the same high standards that we have. Executive Order number 1 when I came into office. Everyone has to reveal, every policymaker, what their sources of income are. As I said, Lucinda and I have gone beyond that. What we've done is to make public our tax reforms, proposals. We've put forward all of our net worth statements. I guess that I would like Mrs. Whitman, who's been critical in this area, to at least pay her dues by putting out the last 4 years of her income tax returns, particularly 1990, the last year of her governmental service. I think that's a minimum thing.
Ms. Whitman.
Oh, I love it. I'm glad the governor welcomes investigations because he's sure got enough of them going on right now. And this is something about which to be concerned. And what we've seen is a pattern of closing the barn door after the horse is out. He issues an executive order after there's been a question of how bonds have been given, how bonds have been awarded, and then he says, well, we shouldn't do that anymore, and we've got to have it open public bidding. That's too late, too little, too late. He also calls for not taking contributions from bond houses while he's continuing to take them himself. He says we shouldn't do it. But I'm getting awfully tired of this back and forth about the taxes because there's something that I just absolutely have to set straight. He says 47 in property tax. My husband and I pay over $1 million in federal tax last year. We paid over $200,000 in state tax and over $30,000 in property tax. Maybe because you, Jim, haven't paid property tax in the last 3.5 years, you've forgotten what it's like. I know what it's like, and believe me, it's been a big, big hit over these last few years, and it becomes something that I understand very, very intimately.
Darlene Superville with a question now to Ms. Whitman.
Mrs. Whitman, you've said all along that you don't like negative campaigning, that you take the high road and leave the mudslinging to Governor Florio. However, you recently began running a campaign that says, quote, he may be the worst governor New Jersey's ever had, and you're also more critical of him, his policies, and his associates, like former Chief of Staff Joe Salema, in your public remarks. Are you taking the low road now because you're down in the polls, and how should the public respond to your sudden shift in strategy?
Darlene, what I did is what I think I had a responsibility to do, which is to put my proposal out there first. And as you know, for 2 weeks, we talked about what my economic recovery proposal was and how it worked for the state of New Jersey. During that time, the governor was taking my positions, twisting them, trying to scare people and make it look like I was some kind of horrific person. I stayed out there with a positive. Now what I'm doing is saying these are why we have to be as dramatic as we are. My plan is doable. It's 5 cents on the dollar. I have the legislative leadership that's done this kind of thing before, and they stand behind me to do it now. I have the tools of the line item veto and the impoundment authority. This is a program phased that can do it and can create jobs in our state. It can happen. It can be done. But we have got to understand how badly hurt we've been by the economic policies of this governor over the last 3.5 years.
Mr. Florio.
Well, let me make reference to something Mrs. Whitman talked about before when she was talking about ethics again, talking about open public bidding. It's interesting to go back and to trace her record in government. She was the head of the Public Utilities Commission. 1990, there was a last-minute deal that was ruled by a court to be illegal. The court determined this deal to transfer to developers acres of wetlands, very important lands to preserve our drinking water supply, was done in a totally illegal way. The process was circumvented. It was literally at the 11th hour of her tenure. And one of the specific findings of the court was that the competitive bidding laws were circumvented. Now, for here that somehow someone is unhappy because I have by executive put into effect a provision that says there will be competitive bidding for bonds, for leases, all of those things which were practices that existed from the very beginning of the state. We're doing these things. Mrs. Whitman is lamenting them, but the matter is she has, whether it be in the conflict of interest situation with the placement of monies in her bank, or whether it be in the situation where this last-minute deal was ruled illegal by a court, Mrs. Whitman's ability to talk about ethical propriety is really not all that it could be.
David Navarro now with a question to Mr. Florio.
Governor Florio, auto insurance reform was one of your campaign promises when you ran for governor, and you take some pride in your record in this area. But polls say many are still not satisfied, and the market transition facility, which replaced the Joint Underwriters Association, has run up a deficit of almost $900 million. How are you going to pay that off?
Well, we are not going to pay it, and that's the thing that we've talked about. The insurance industry is going to pay. Except for the IRA, I suspect the NRA, the auto insurance industry is probably my least devoted group of fans. We have made them pay. They ran up bills with the old JUA. They have run up BF. And we've said that you are going to have to roll that into your rates, and you're not going to have the ability to pass it on to consumers. I've seen Mrs. Whitman's comments, which seem to parrot the auto insurance industry in saying that the reason the debt was created by the NPF was because the rates were not high enough. Now, I will ask you to go out on the street and find me someone who will tell you that the auto insurance rates in New Jersey are not high enough. We have been holding the line. There have been virtually no increases allowed over the last number of years for the auto insurance companies. 8% of the people in New Jersey who are good drivers, perfect drivers, no point. In some instances, reductions. New Jersey will never be a low-cost state in a fair system, and that's what we're working on.
Ms. Whitman.
Governor, your freedom with the truth absolutely staggers me. I defy you to show me a quote anywhere where I have said that rates were too low. In fact, I'd ask the homeowners and everybody in this state to go back. Remember, this man promised a 20% reduction in insurance rates. Go back, look at your '89 auto insurance and look at your 1993 auto insurance and see whether there's a 20% reduction. If there is, fine. If there isn't, and I don't think there's anyone who's going to say that it's 20% less expensive to own and maintain a car here in New Jersey now than it was back in 1989. The other thing that I hear saying is the insurance companies are going to pay. Why is it then, Governor, that Sam Fortunato, back in the summer, quietly passed a regulation that will allow the insurance companies to put a surcharge back on to start paying off the MTF debt? There's no question but the consumer is the one who's going to end up paying, as they always do. We have to lower auto insurance premiums to understand the need for basic policies, and we have to get it down for those people who own cars that aren't worth $1,000, much less carrying $1,000 worth of auto insurance premiums.
In a moment, we'll have our last question from Nora Muchanic to Ms. Whitman, but I would caution each of you that we have 45 seconds left for each of you to answer Ms. Muchanic's question. So, Nora.
To Mrs. Whitman.
Ms. Whitman, yes.
Okay. Mrs. Whitman, New Jersey is 5th in the nation for the number of AIDS cases here. Almost 17,000 have been reported. Half those people got AIDS through dirty needles. Now, the head of the President's Task Force on AIDS endorses the idea of a needle exchange program. So does the State Health Commissioner. I'm wondering where you stand on that issue.
Nora, I do not support that, and we're #1 in the death of women from AIDS in Newark and in our cities, and it's a terrible tragedy. But drug use is illegal, and I do not believe that we should be allowing the free exchange of needles, giving out needles to encourage a behavior that is basically illegal. Plus the fact that if you look at studies, they show that what happens with the addicts is very often while they'll take a new needle and use it once, they will then pass that on. It is not the kind of foolproof approach to solving the AIDS crisis. We need better research. We need to continue with the research we're doing. We need to continue with education and outreach to get to people in the communities to try to go after behavioral changes that will stop this use, this drug use and the use of needles at all. But I cannot support government giving out free needles.
You found one we agree on 100%. I identify with the remarks.
May I just, a couple of months ago at the AIDS conference, you said that you would consider such a plan, and you were questioned about why you were not out in front of this.
No, because my position is the same as Mrs. Whitman's on this. What I said is that some have come forward and says, well, the science is building to demonstrate that if you put needles into circulation, you will not increase the use of drugs. And I said, fine. If you want to go start to make that case, because my concern is the same one that you just heard, that you can't be encouraging or discouraging one problem while you encourage another problem. I do not think it's appropriate to be putting needles out in a free exchange system.
Thank you. I'm overwhelmed by the consensus coming from the podium, and I suppose it's an appropriate time to say that the discussion portion of this debate is now over, and now time for the candidates' closing statements. Once again, the order of appearance was determined by a coin flip before this broadcast. Christine Todd Whitman has the first closing statement. Mrs. Whitman.
Well, I want to thank first the League of WABC for providing us with this opportunity tonight. I think it has become very clear to the voters of the state of New Jersey that November the 2nd offers them a true choice. We can either continue with the failed policies and broken promises of this government that's cost us so in jobs lost and bankrupt businesses, in home foreclosures, and really has robbed a whole group of children of a quality education, or we can try for change. We can start to cut the rate of growth of government, cut taxes, create jobs, take our government back. It's up to the voters in November. I also appreciate the opportunity to set straight the record on some of the distortions and half-truths that have been projected on the airwaves about me over the last few months. And it's become very clear that we need to change both the way we govern and the way we campaign. So I'd like to offer a challenge tonight. And to date, Governor, you've spent almost $2 million in negative advertising on me. I propose that starting next week, we ban all negative ads. From now forward, it's you talking about your record and what you're going to do for the future, and me talking about my economic program will do for the state of New Jersey. Just the two of us, one-on-one, talking issues in our own ads, and I'd happily cede you the rest of my time to answer that.
Let me first of all thank the League of Women Voters and the stations as well for the opportunity to come before you. These have not really been an easy 4 years for anybody, and certainly they have not been an easy 4 years for Lucinda and myself, but I've learned a lot. I've learned that you have to take responsibility for making tough decisions. I've learned that you have to invest if you want to have a good future. I've learned that we have to really work hard to make sure that the future is good. We don't want to go back. We really don't want to go back to the theories of the 80s that brought us such pain. What we want to do is to be able to continue to stop ocean dumping as we've done, to build the shore, and to make sure that it's a good place for us to recreate and have our tourism industry. Ban assault weapons. Mrs. Whitman says it's a lousy law, but I think it's good. We want to make sure that the welfare reform system that we've initiated, make sure that fathers take the responsibility, not the taxpayers. We want to enforce the laws of this state, the crime laws, so as to be able to take thugs and violent crimes out of circulation. The differences between Mrs. Whitman and myself are very dramatic. I don't want to go back to trickle-down economics. I reject the gloomy vision of the future that she has. This all comes down to two things: credibility, who has it and who doesn't, and responsibility, who will take it and who won't. I want to build on the foundation that we've laid, a state of opportunity for all of our people.
Florio. Governor Florio, I'm sure reporters are going to be asking you about Mrs. Whitman's suggestion about advertising after this broadcast, and so you might as well respond to it now, if you will.
Well, I will tell you that we have not been having negative advertising. Talking about the record may seem negative to Mrs. Whitman, but when I talk about her saying it was a lousy law, she said it. When I said that she wanted to water down the drunk driving laws, she said it. So what we're the facts, and Mrs. Whitman is not comfortable with the facts.
You don't want to go head-to-head, though, Governor. You saying what your programs have done and will do for the state, and I saying what I believe my economic program will do for the state.
That's exactly what we're doing, and your program
you haven't had one ad like that.
Your program has been regarded by everyone as really not a credible program.
Well, we could enjoy this for another couple of hours, I think, but it is time for us to give thanks and acknowledgments where they are due. We'd like to thank you, both of you, for being with us. candidates for governor of New Jersey, taking part in this program on WABC-TV and WPVI-TV. And our thanks to the reporters who joined us tonight, Darlene Superville of the Associated Press, David Novarro of WABC-TV, and Nora Muchanic of WPVI-TV.
We also want to acknowledge the League of Women Voters of New Jersey for their nonpartisan efforts and their commitment to the debate process.
And we'd like also to acknowledge the New Jersey Election Law Enforcement Commission, because they require candidates to accept public funding to take part in this debate, and without that, perhaps we wouldn't be here. For now, I'm Bill Beutel of WABC-TV.
And I'm Jim Gardner of WPVI-TV. Don't forget, Election Day is November 2nd, and you can have an impact only if you vote. Thank you for joining us, and good night from the Trenton Bureau of WPVI-TV.
I would like to thank the CIT group based in Livingston for funding the League's education fund for this debate. Citizen participation is basic to good government. Make a difference and vote on November 2nd. Vote for the candidates at all levels of government who make the decisions which will affect the future of New Jersey and you. Call the League's toll-free citizen information line for voting information at 1-800-792-VOTE.
This has been an Eyewitness News. Lottery's number.